to today's video. Today I thought I'd talk you through some of the books that got me into reading. So I haven't actually always loved reading. I actually only really got into it in 2022. I read a couple books in 2021, but 2022 was where I actually really got into reading. And I'm going to talk through some of the books that got me started and some of the books that I've read since and I think would be a good place to start if you're wanting to get into reading. This video could also be some book recommendations for you if you're already into reading. So starting with the books that got me into reading, there's about 5 that really stand out to me that I remember reading and thinking, oh my god, I actually really enjoyed that. And I remember it so clearly that that was really the start of me getting into books. So the first one is Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton. I loved this book when I read it. I loved it. It's such a heartwarming book that has a lot of deeper messages in it, but it's also so funny. It's so light-hearted and just fun. And I literally laughed out loud when I read this book. This also has a TV show out as well, but I definitely recommend reading the book first. But the TV show is also really good. If you're in your 20s especially, this book is for you. It's so relatable, it's so funny, and I just have nothing but good things to say about it. It's basically Dolly Alderton talking us through her 20s and the struggles of being a 20-something in London and trying to find a job, and how friendships change over that time and how your perspective changes over time and what you think is important isn't actually important. It's just so good, and some of the stories she tells in this are just so funny and they're so chaotic, but in the best way. Next we have The Silent Patient. This is the book that really got me into psychological thrillers. I just loved the way the story was told and how the build up to the twist was done. And I still remember the feeling that that twist gave me when I first read it, and the whole run up to the twist and just all the pieces coming together. It basically follows a therapist and he's working with this woman who shot her husband in the head 5 times one day and hasn't said a word since, and it's basically about him trying to work out what happened and sort of get her to speak and kind of uncovering why she hasn't spoken since and what on earth happened that night. It's just so good, and it's still one of my top thrillers that I recommend to people. And then we have another thriller, and that is The Night She Disappeared by Lisa Jewell. Lisa Jewell's writing is so good to get you started reading. It's so quick paced, it's so easy to read, it's so interesting, and she writes those sort of books that never really slow down, which is exactly what you need if you want to start getting into reading. This is the first Lisa Jewell book that I read and it's still one of my favourites. It's basically about a teenage mum who goes missing. If I remember right, it goes between 2017 and 2018, back and forth, between what happened that night when she disappeared and what's happening now with her mum, I think it is, who's trying to find her. I love the way that you're kind of learning along with the mum what's going on. You're kind of getting puzzle pieces, but you can't put it all together yet. And I just love it. This is such a good thriller if you want something that's a bit more suspenseful, but not in a scary sense, just in a, oh, it's kind of creepy and like what's going on vibe. Next two are 2 Colleen Hoover books. Now, there is so much controversy about Colleen Hoover, but I do think her books are a great place to start if you want to get into reading. And 2 of her books are actually partly what got me into reading. So I do think they are a good place to start. So the first one is Verity. This is another thriller. And this is one of those creepy, kind of gives you shivers kind of thriller. Basically about a best-selling author who is Verity, and she's unable to finish one of her books, so her husband hires a writer to come in and finish them for her. So this writer lives in the house with them and some things just aren't quite right. It's all a bit creepy, something's going on, and it's basically about the writer kind of finding out what's actually happening. And I'm not going to say anymore because I don't want to spoil it, but it's such a good one to get you started reading and it's so fast-paced. The next one is quite controversial as well, but personally I loved reading this. It was one that really stuck with me and I still think about those characters to this day, and that is Ugly Love. The thing that I actually like about Colleen Hoover's plots as well is that they seem so out of this world, almost not realistic, that it's such a nice escape sometimes to just dive into that world and what's going on with those characters, if that makes sense. And this definitely feels like one of them, even though the plot could happen and it is technically realistic, it's probably not likely. But I do like how Colleen Hoover's plots are so extreme and dramatic, and they definitely make for fast-paced, interesting books. So this follows Tate and Miles, who are both looking for a no-strings attachment sort of arrangement. And as they start to actually get to know each other a bit more, they actually start to like each other a bit more. They kind of both have the history, a lot of baggage. We just sort of uncover why they act the way they do and just how they both kind of ended up where they are and why they're not looking for anything more serious. Like I said, her plots tend to be quite dramatic and extreme, but if you know that going in, I think you will enjoy it. And the thing that really stuck with me about this book was Miles as a character. I don't know what it is, but something about Miles just really stuck with me, and I found that I was really invested in them as individuals as well as them together. So they're just some of the books that got me into reading. I'm going to go through some of the books that I've read since then that I think would be a good place to start. But I do just want to say really quickly, if a book intrigues you in any way, I think give it a go. No matter what anybody else's opinions are, no matter what the controversy is, you might find a book that you absolutely love. And I just think at the end of the day, if a book draws your attention for whatever reason it might be, give it a go, see if you like it. You might find something you absolutely love and are obsessed with, regardless of anyone else's opinions, regardless of any other controversy. Anyway, enough of my rambling. Now let's move on to some books that I've read more recently, but that I think would be a good place to start getting into reading. So I'm going to do this in genres, just because I'm such a mood reader, and for me, choosing a book definitely depends on my mood and what genre I'm feeling at that time. So I'm going to start with two young adult books, and the first one is Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter. This book is adorable. I rave and rave about this book just because of how cute it is. It's such an easy read and it's just so sweet, and I think if you're a rom-com lover, you are going to love this book. This basically follows a girl in her senior year, and she really wants her magical prom night moment with her big crush that she's got, and Wes, who's been her next door neighbour for basically her entire life, she asks him to help her get the guy that she wants, and it just follows along with their story, and it's so cute. It's got the fake dating trope in, it's got kind of enemies to lovers vibe. It's just such an easy, fun, light-hearted read. And it's also got movie quotes at the beginning of every chapter, which are just so cute and really make the book come together. And then the next YA is definitely one of my favourite all-time books, and this is a bit more of a tragic love story vibe. I personally love a sad book. I love them. But if you don't like sad books, this one's not going to be for you. But if you love a kind of tragic romance vibe, then I would definitely recommend this book, and that is If He Had Been With Me by Laura Nolan. This follows two teenagers through high school, and they used to be absolutely inseparable, so you kind of find out why they're not as close anymore and what's happened with them, and then you also follow them kind of working their way back to each other. The first page of this book kind of tells you what happens, and then you go backwards and kind of see the run up to the big event that happens. But the event itself is not as it seems at the start of the book. There's so much more to it than it originally seems. And I've seen a lot of people be put off this book because of the first chapter, but it's definitely not what it seems. There is a lot more to the story than that. And it's personally one of my all-time favourite books, so I would definitely recommend it. And also the second one's coming out in February this year, which I literally cannot wait for. Moving on to thrillers, I have two here that I would recommend getting you started. One of them is another Lisa Jewell, so this is Then She Was Gone. I would recommend any Lisa Jewell books, but this one and The Night She Disappeared are my two personal favourites. This is about a girl who goes missing and her mum that's never given up looking for her, and it follows along with the mum who meets this charming man, and she starts to uncover some things about her daughter's disappearance. This is so fast paced. I think I read this literally in like 2 days, and it's one of those books that is definitely a page turner. And then the second thriller is The Housemaid by Frida McFadden. This again is another fast-paced page turner of a book. This follows a woman who's just come out of prison and she really needs a job, and she gets a job as a housemaid for this kind of rich family, and there are just some really weird things going on in this house. Something's not sitting right with the main girl in this, and we kind of follow along with her kind of working out what's actually going on in this house. We also uncover why she was in prison in the first place and sort of her background, and we also find out what's been happening in that house before she was even there, and also why it's the way it is now, if that makes sense. This is also definitely on the creepier side of thrillers. It's the kind of book that makes you feel a bit uneasy when you're reading it, a bit creeped out but in a good way, because I think that's what you want sometimes from a thriller. Next we have two romances. So the first one is very light-hearted, it's very funny, and it's one of those books that's so easy and quick to read because it's just so fun. And that is 7 Exes by Lucy Vine. And this is about a woman who reads this magazine article saying that a woman will date 7 people before finding the one, and she has 7 exes. So she thinks the love of her life is one of these 7 exes. So she starts to track down each one of her exes one by one to see what they're doing now with their lives, to see whether they could be the one, the love of her life. And it's just such a fun, light-hearted rom-com. The next one is another romance, but this one probably has a bit of a deeper message running through it, and that is Happy Place by Emily Henry. This follows Harriet and Wyn and a group of friends who go away together, and Harriet and Wyn have broken up, but they've not told any of their friends. So it's basically about them fake dating, and it goes back and forth between how they got together, how they started, and how they've ended up where they are now. And what I really love about this book is that it's not just focused on the romantic relationship between Harriet and Wyn, but also between Harriet and her friends, and how her friendships are changing and developing over time. I think that's just really nice to see as well, because it just makes it feel more rounded as a book. I also love Emily Henry's writing. I think she's definitely an author that would be good to get you into reading, because her writing is just so fun and fast-paced. And this is definitely a book that made me laugh out loud. It's a heartwarming book. It's just so good. And then the last book that I'm going to recommend is definitely a book that changed reading for me. It's very character driven. Now, I love a character driven book because I just feel like I get so invested and so attached to the characters, and usually they tend to be more developed characters that you feel like you really truly know. So if you think you'd enjoy a more plot driven book, then I probably wouldn't suggest this to get you started into reading. But if you think you'd love a character-driven book, then this is the book for you. And that is Magnolia Parks by Jessa Hastings. We know by now how much I love this series, how much I rave about it, but there is something so addictive about this whole entire series. And like I said, it's very character-driven, but the characters in it are just so good. They feel like real, raw people, and you just get so caught up with their drama and their lives. It basically follows Magnolia and BJ, and they are basically written in the stars. They are meant to be together and everybody knows it, but they can't seem to work out a way to be together for whatever reason that may be. And they can be very toxic, but you also absolutely love them at times. And it's a really weird feeling of rooting for them but not wanting to root for them, and sometimes you absolutely hate them together and sometimes you love them together, and it's such a roller coaster of emotions, but in the best way possible. It's one of those books that will literally make you laugh out loud. It will make you cry. It will shock you at times. It will leave you staring at a wall. It just has everything in it. I love it. I don't think I will ever stop recommending these books. And if you like Gossip Girl, but specifically Blair and Chuck's relationship in Gossip Girl, this is the book for you. So they're just some of the books that got me into reading, and some book recommendations that I think might help you get into reading as well. And at the end of the day, I think read whatever books you want to read, and whatever intrigues you the most, go for it. You might absolutely love it. And I hope this video has been some sort of help to get you started. And thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in my next one.